$51 billion. That's how much eco-extremists have attempted to cause in damages by defacing some of the world's most valuable works of art. But it's not just about the money. Climate extremists also disrupt peace and harm infrastructure, all in the name of climate change. An overwhelmingly redundant phrase. But what happens to these artworks and the extremists once the headlines fade? We'll explore the aftermath of art vandalism, the impact it has on our cultural heritage and economy, and what happened to those famous paintings. Imagine yourself walking into a world-renowned art museum and seeing some of history's most treasured masterpieces defaced by graffiti, glue, and even food. This isn't some twisted dream, it's the harsh reality that has been happening over the last year as eco-extremist groups take extreme measures to make their voices heard on the matter of climate change.
I'm sure you'll agree we're in an incredibly grave situation with the climate crisis. So Just Stop Oil has one simple demand, and that is that the UK government put an end to licensing new oil and gas in the UK. So it's very clear that the disruption will end as soon as the government issued this statement to stop new oil and gas. But we will have to continue because at the moment, I just do not know what else we're going to do.
It all began in Paris at the Louvre Museum. The Mona Lisa, a painting valued at over $50 billion, the most recognized piece of art in the world, was nearly defaced by an individual, a young man disguised as an elderly woman in a wheelchair. But this was just the beginning, as more and more famous artworks from Van Gogh to Monet were targeted by these radical climate groups. These extremists not only cause damages worth millions, but also disrupt daily life by blocking traffic, emergency vehicles, airports and supply chains, and even shutting down oil and fuel terminals. These groups' chosen methods are not only destructive, but intentionally attention-seeking, as they aim to mainstream a message through the defiling and defacing of centuries-old buildings and cultural icons. Their reasoning for these actions range from political to social, but most importantly, it's about mainstreaming heavily debated apocalyptic worldviews, doom and gloom, to emotionally convince others of their cause.
The media has failed to make political change. If you were doing your job properly, everyone would be out on the street.
I cannot say more strongly we need to just stop oil. If we don't stop oil, we're going to kill the planet.
Half of the population will be exposed to climate conditions that are unlivable.
I feel this is what I need to do because my future and all the futures of the people around me.
I'm 24 years old and I'm here. I'm here because I don't have a future.
I'm with 20 other young people who are up here with me who are terrified of their futures. I'm so scared. This is obscene.
And you might hate me for doing this, and you're entitled to hate me.
Anyone who loves their country should be on the right side of history.
But I wish you would direct all that anger and hatred at our government.
Their convictus ideology is fed by the anxiety of a seemingly bleak and hopeless future, justifying any means necessary to promote the cause. Societal and economic disruption appear irrelevant, as the ends justify the means. Because of this, their intents, tactics, and motives are increasingly being called into question. From critics who claim the movement is comprised of attention-seeking young females, to those that believe the means are unjustified, and the others who call it a form of color revolution, eroding the West's respect for its own culture. However, for each critique, there are counterpoints. There are those that highlight some paintings went undamaged, others who believe the means are justified, and those that believe the apocalypse is near for all humanity. And of course, there are the politicians, extremists, media, journalists, and scientists, all muddying the waters.
Some government and business leaders are saying one thing, but doing another. Simply put, they are lying. And the results will be catastrophic.
Climate change is literally an existential threat to our nation and to the world.
Climate change is making it easier for the heaviest rains to become even heavier And this summer is a good example of that trend, which has been playing out over decades.
Natural disasters are not getting worse. Deaths from natural disasters have declined over 90% over the last 100 years. We're just much better at dealing with hurricanes and floods and non-climate related disasters like earthquakes as well.
Attempting to say, oh, this is global warming, the floods in Pakistan, and these events would have happened anyways.
And there's the average of all their models. And then here's the real temperatures as measured both on Earth and with our satellites.
But wait, this episode is about famous paintings, not the climate crisis, so subscribe to not miss part 2 on the climate crisis and leave a comment with other topic ideas. One last thing though, why aren't Western governments being tougher on these extremist groups? Should they? Well, an extremist view on climate makes the government's own policies, such as the 2030 agenda, look more reasonable by comparison. It may be helping the government appear more even and measured. However, at the time of recording, Rishi Sunak and the UK government have proposed a new public order bill that would hinder these climate extremists' actions. But these groups say they'll violate it anyway. The same could be expected for groups in the United States and the rest of Europe. As the ideology continues to escalate, climate extremist branches are popping up all over the world, with names like Declare Emergency in the USA and others, each with their own unique tactics. For example, Tire Extinguishers focuses on targeting SUVs and even electric vehicles, intentionally deflating the owner's tires so they can't drive. Finally though, what really happens to those famous paintings? Well, many of these iconic pieces are either behind glass or glazed, such is the case for the Mona Lisa and Van Gogh's Sunflowers. Take the National Gallery's word for it if you don't trust mine. But paintings with glazes still require restoration and greatly increase the risk of irreparable damages if attacked. Despite the violent appearance of these viral extremist videos, these artworks are usually cleaned, restored, and the frames are replaced. However, this comes at a cost, as museums and galleries must invest in expensive technology and measures to protect the artworks and restore them. For the buildings and statues that find themselves in the crosshairs, that's a different story, one that requires lots of cleaning chemicals, man-hours, and money. Art vandalism and defiling may seem like a small act to some, but the aftermath of art vandalism extends beyond physical damage. It causes a ripple effect throughout society, and how our societies view themselves is very important, as well as the emotional and economic costs of damages. It's important to remember that these artworks are not just pieces of art, but symbols of our culture and history, and they should be treated with the respect and care they deserve. Let us know what you think in the comments. Subscribe.
How far is reality from this doom and gloom fear?
It's very far. It's very far from gloom and doom. Okay.
So it's not upon us.
No.